Hello and welcome to part 2 of the analysis of 5 Renaissance gardens. In this episode, I'll talk about the main ascendings and descending. This is a garden based in Holdenby in Northamptonshire. The garden was organized into split levels that were easily achieved using the landmass surrounding the area, due to the fact that the building site was sloping in nature. The garden space was organized into terraced descents. Indeed, these inequities were viewed as a benefit, not a drawback within the garden itself, with the gentle slopes being transformed into small miniature gardens within the garden. This garden was created in 1857 by Christopher Hatton, the Queen's trusted and favorite landscape designer and Lord Chancellor from 1587 until his death 4 years later. He designed both the largest private house in England of that era and provided a setting for the most elaborate formal garden alongside a large deer park that took up almost 1/3 of the parish. Two maps that were discovered, dated between 1580 and 1587 respectively, showcase the creation of the park and the development of the gardens around the new house. It surrounded the Moss Manor House until it's replaced. Currently, a mansion occupies that spot and is built around two courtyards that had two symmetrical facades with central towers. It was large enough to look at the garden from a very large view. The garden is called the Green, which the Lord Treasurer Burleigh described as a large, long, straight fairway. The garden also had a large pond next to a freshly planted spinnery, alongside a long stables building that hid the nearby village from view. There was also a gatehouse that provided access to a base court, which revealed a house as well as two archways that pierced the walls at either side, that still survive and are dated to around 1583, when led out towards the village, and a new inn to accommodate visitors, and there opened up into gardens. Within the garden, there's a series of plantations separating the house from the other common fields around the north and west sides. This preceded the previous garden, which was a series of 9 square flower beds. Within this area, there are several close-board fences of pointed plaques divided up to section off other parts of the private area from the rest of the housing location. The garden was likewise used for profit. Various fish ponds seem to be well stocked, and an adjacent 600-acre park contained a large rabbit warren and a managed herd of deer. These hunting locations served as a means of both adding hunting and aesthetic qualities to the park. The formal gardens within the garden, separating the parkland from the house, were divided into several areas. Thousands of tons of earth were used to create a level, roughly square platform that extended along the entire length of the south front of the house between the end pavilions, projecting up to 5 meters high even to this day above the sloping ground, where a series of terraces dropped down at either side, with the flat area in between being raised for walks around the edges. Each terrace was used for a garden. Based on current textual evidence, the central feature of this garden was a series of radiating lines or spokes within the gap of a southern arc, indicating that it may have been an immense flat sundial. A series of terraces were found at either side of the garden dial, and remain to this day as permanent earthworks, and were called the rosaries, indicating that they were once probably used for growing roses. The master behind this garden was Mr. Hatton. He employed a Catholic priest as his gardener and designer of the garden prior to the latter's arrest in 1583 for involvement in Somerville's plot to murder the Queen. The original paired arrangement of 6 terraces were modified in 1587 through the incorporation of a large rectangular square fish pond into the base of the western group of the terraces, as well as the addition of a bowling alley to the garden. The medieval church of Holdenby, containing a series of recently added family memorials and dynastic tombs, were also added to the garden. Prior to that, in 1580, it was once an orchard. With the addition of the pond in 1587, the prospect of making a zigzag pattern that leads to that central pond was created, and was concluded by the end of 1587. In 1608, King James I bought Holdenby as a country estate for Prince Charles, but after the English Civil War, the property was seized by Parliament and following that sold to Captain Anne Baines in 1650. The house was then demolished except for a small part that was kept as a residence, and much of the surrounding garden was abandoned and left to rot, and its woodland cut down. The property returned to the Crown at the Restoration, and thereafter passed multiple hands by either grant or purchase, which culminated in the rebuilding of the present house and garden towards the end of the 1800s. Much of the late 16th century layout remains intact as part of both the house and the garden itself, showcasing the durability of such designs of that era. The development of different routes and plantains through succession of individual garden spaces enabled a variety of narratives and imagery to be presented. Whilst spots like Holdenby were meant to be very visible, others still were designed to be more private. The final garden we will talk about is the garden of Northamptonshire Manor of Lyveden. This was the garden of a former Catholic turned non-denominational due to his view of the Catholic Church becoming corrupt, was Sir Thomas Tresham, who created a garden dedicated to Christian theology in 1594. Despite being unfinished when he died in 1605, the remains of the garden remained viable, and the details and plans he designed were finished by workmen serving under the English crown to fully create the whole experience he designed. This was a private garden meant for him and him alone, although the final design is now open to the public. The gardens occupy a long strip of ground rising for almost half a mile, approximately 530 meters, up to a hill slope that forms a valley side above the manor house. They terminate at a lodge or banqueting house that was designed in the form of a Greek cross. This house was ornamented with albums and inscriptions proclaiming devotion to Christ's Passion and the Blessed Virgin Mary. It overlooked a large lawn and a series of nut and fruit trees arranged in groups of 5 in various arrangements. Both groups were flanked by a path that kept on going upwards, which included a broad series of terraces that contained various types of orchards containing different types of fruits, such as different cultivars of pear, plum, and apple, arranged in regular rows of walks running in between, meant to be interpreted as a representation of the Garden of Eden, although some speculate it may have been a representation of the garden at Gethsemane. Within this moated orchard, an arrangement of 10 concentric rings or flower beds, no longer visible but identifiable as crop marks in aerial photographs as of 1940, which were built to resemble the manuscript pavement and turf labyrinths of medieval Christian thought. Within each circle there is either roses or raspberries planted within, both of which are commonly associated within medieval Christian iconography with the Passion of Christ. Other elements that were worked into that garden, as per the design of Sir Tresham, various elements of Catholic numerology and inscription were also added. The garden was not finished because of Sir Thomas's death in September 1605, during which time the property passed on to his son Francis, but this property was forfeited shortly afterwards due to the fact that Francis was involved in the gunpowder plot, which led to Francis's arrest shortly thereafter. As of the writing of this paper, well, that about covers everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to me on BitChute for a greater variety of content, 4 videos a week. And thank you to all my subscribers on both platforms. I appreciate it.